Okay, it is 8:30, and boy, this quarter is at the pivotal point. I call week 6 the pivotal point. The reason is because I say you go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you start heading downhill, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So this is the highest point that we're going to go, and it's really the signal of the midpoint. So you'll have weeks 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, the next 5 weeks. So if you haven't already caught up, it's important. I will say this, so you'll know, and I'm going to say this to all of my classes, that at the end of this week, any assignments from weeks 1 through 5 will not be accepted unless there is some extenuating circumstances and you have previously worked out an arrangement with me. I'm not going to accept 1 through 5 after week 6. Very, very, very important. And if you do submit them now even, you're going to lose points as well. So some of you have zeros in there, and this is an opportunity that I do this once a quarter to give you a chance to catch up. So final statement is that at the end of week 6, which is Sunday night, any assignments not previously turned in from weeks 1 through 5 will not be accepted, and they will remain zeros unless I have previously worked out some arrangements, and there's some students who have reached out to me and we have an understanding about it. If by chance I inadvertently don't accept your assignment, make sure you reach back out to me and remind me. But I will be checking to see if I saw an email before that we communicated with, or that you submitted a note or something to me. Anyway, the bottom line is it's time to move forward. We're going into the second half of the course, starting with week number 7. So with that, let me share my screen before we get to the lecture. Again, tonight's lecture will go an hour and a half. However far I've gone, I will stop at that particular time. Okay, so I'm not going to continue to go over the information on the right side, except just to remind you that our next lecture, we only have 2 more to go, week 8 and week 10. And I do encourage you to listen to the lectures, because the lectures give you guidance about how to complete the assignments for weeks 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. I try to make sure that you have enough information. That's why I take the time before we start the lecture. So here's our announcement. Let me put that over there. In this week, we're going to involve ourselves with public health and safety, chapters 11 and 12. And of the text, I previously sent you the PowerPoints, and then we're going to look at the activities, offenses against public order and health, that you should be studying as well. Finally, we have 2 other things. We have 3 other things actually. Discussion posts. Your initial posts are due tonight by 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And judging from the comments of previous discussion posts, most of you know my system because I follow the rubric. And if you give me a good post, I read them all, by the way. And if I see something in there that's not correct, I'll point it out to you. Or if I see something that tells me you didn't live up to the standards of the rubric, in other words, you submit a one-liner or a very brief post, I'll let you know that as well, and you will lose points. Also, very important that you submit your post on time. You are technically supposed to lose 2 points for each day that your posts are late. But I have been, since I'm teaching, giving students the benefit of the doubt and only subtracted 1 point. And I think that's as fair as you can get. So therefore, it is very important that you get your post in on time. Your reply post is due on Saturday, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. Okay. Then your written assignment, corporate liability for criminal liability for corporate officers, and then you have the quiz. Again, I encourage you to try to take the quiz at the end of the week. Try to take the quiz. I mean, both the written assignment, criminal liability for corporate officers, and the quiz are due by Sunday. I do encourage you to try to do the quiz at the end, and the reason why is because of the fact that the quiz contains some issues or questions concerning the module, the reading, and the written assignments. So it is very important that you have had the opportunity to answer those and be familiar with them. Plus, I provide you with an outline every week of the chapter, and you can quickly take a look and glean through that as well. There is a section in there that has terminology. You can almost be assured that many of the words, not all, will be on the 10 questions that are given each week. So very important. All right, so now let's, and then my motto, I've already shared with you why diversity is a springboard to success. So let's move on to taking a look at our course calendar real quickly. Again, as I remind students, course calendar gives you an idea of when assignments are due, and it tells you something more about the assignments as well as what's in the actual module itself. So right now, we're at this week. This is week 6 right here. And this tells the assignments that are due this week that we just went over, reminding you of the dates as I just mentioned, and then your reply post, and then your written assignments. And again, remember, with your written assignments, APA, which means citations and references, and a cover sheet. So I haven't taken off points for cover sheets, but I'm thinking about changing that policy, not in this course, but in future courses, because it is important that you understand cover sheets are part of the requirement. But I've been pretty flexible with that. But I have been pretty dogmatic on requiring APA citation of references. Why? Because they're very important. I've already talked about how important they are, but I'll just say this very briefly, is that it gives some credibility to your paper. It gets you into the habit of giving credit for the sources that you cite. And remember, citations are not the same as references. I had a discussion with a student. Citations are found in the body of the paper. References are at the end. And incidentally, if you have 4 references and 1 citation, there's something wrong, because your references should be further details of where you got the citations from at the end. And we have a format, and we have plenty of resources under the APA tab as well as on the home page linking you to that. So I'm very dogmatic about that. And then the requirement that you write 2 to 3 pages. Again, I say this because we're not trying to make you stretch. What we're trying to do is make sure that you understand that if you can't adequately address the issues in a manner that satisfies them so that the reader will get an understanding and learn about them. Remember, you're supposed to be writing not to me, you're supposed to be writing to someone who doesn't know anything about it. Now, with the fact that I know something about it, I go through it much faster, and I'm looking for certain issues to be covered and how they're covered. So 2 to 3 pages. I mean, I've seen people go beyond that. I've never docked anybody's points because they went beyond. I'm just saying these are the minimum requirements. And I remind you, repeating the facts don't satisfy that requirement. I look and see how much of your paper repeats the facts. I am more interested in your critical thinking. I continue to remind students about the importance of critical thinking. We spend time talking about that almost every week. And I started out by reminding you, if you go look at your syllabus, it is one of the transferable skills. It's one of the important transferable skills that students need to be able to operate with. So very important. This applies for your written assignment as well as your projects. And then, of course, your quiz takes place. So then next week, your reading assignment will be one chapter, chapter 13. In fact, the next 2 weeks, I think, is one chapter. I think chapter 13 is that, and then I think I'm right. 14 the following week. But other than that, then you're going to have 2 chapters. And so then make sure that you do the same thing. So our next lecture will be the 22nd. So now let's go right into the module itself. It's about 8:42, and I've spent pretty close to 15 minutes just going over this. I could skip this, but I think that it is important and beneficial to you. I think many students appreciate that when they look at this. Again, here are the facts. Here's a reminder of the 2 to 3 page requirement. Just remember, even though you don't see right here APA, APA is required in all written assignments. I've said that over and over and over again. Students ask me, do I need to write this in APA format? And I say, if I said all written assignments, there it is right there. Well, discussion posts, I'm not dogmatic about it enough. But there are some professors that are dogmatic about that, and I am not one about that, because the reason why is because my idea of discussions is to get you to do what you would do if you were in class. You might not provide the place you get the information, but you'll present the ideas. And, you know, it's okay. And whenever you do include a citation or reference in a discussion post, I always let you know that I really liked it. I pointed out I really, really like it. Really like it. And then I like extra discussion posts as well. Then, okay, so your quiz then comes out as well, okay? So now let's get back to dealing with the content, the lesson content, quickly before we go to the lecture. Our objectives, we've already kind of laid them out: health, crimes, crimes of order, and public safety. And then again, repeating what your assignments are here. So here is the little section, offenses against public order and health. You want to read this. You want to be able to understand these things. You want to understand strict liability and what it means. You kind of should already know that. Responsible corporate officers helps you to understand what's in your written assignment that you have. And then some changes that have taken place, like smoking being prohibited in bars, restaurants, and so forth. And then recognizing the issues of studies that the impact of secondhand smoke have had on other individuals' health, sure many of you are familiar with the fact that even if you're not a smoker, if a person is smoking around you, you can be subjected to more danger than they are immediately. I encourage people when they're around me not to smoke for my own health and safety. And then the September 11th, we talk about the Patriot Act, elaborate some more on it, and then there is a little thing that you put in, and I'm not going to take time to do it, but you can fill it in and complete the activity because it helps you. And incidentally, this helps you with the idea of preparing you for your quiz as well. So you wanna go through, and there is a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 things that will help you to be able to you fill those in, and then you will come up with a crossword puzzle. But you're not just playing a game. You're actually helping yourself at the same time to go through the module and study the module as well. All right? Might be a good little thing to review sometimes just before you take the quiz again, just to take a look at it. I'm not saying more about that from this particular point. So that's what we have for this week, an expectation. So now let's get to our lecture. Offenses against public health and the environment. You should, before I start, understand the context of these laws. These laws are designed to protect the public from health issues that could result from contamination of water, air pollution, noise pollution, and things of that nature. Be aware of the fact that our natural resources need to be protected because we don't get any more. There's no more water. The water recycles. Your rain, and it comes back down. I mean, it goes up, evaporates, comes back down, and we need to protect our resources. If we contaminate big bodies of water, where either we have drinking water, not oceans because we don't drink that, but we do also have fish and other things that we eat from that, and you can be assured that if there's mercury or something in the water and it gets it to those fish or crabs or whatever you eat, the point of the matter is it then gets into your body and then it causes an adverse effect. So we and the same thing with garbage and trash. That's why we have some strict requirements now on waste management. It's not something, years ago when I was a little boy, there was no such thing as recycling. But a lot of people don't appreciate and understand the importance of recycling. But what it is an attempt to regulate our resources. So I'm going to say that up front and keeping that in the back of your mind as we go through talking about the issues here. So the Industrial Revolution, starting with the Industrial Revolution, long time ago, back in, and actually early in the 1800s, people recognized the need to protect public health. It is very important, and the environment being something, breathing the air, drinking the water, we watch out for littering and contaminating the noise and stuff like that. Noise also can be detrimental to you as well, not just disturbing your peace, but there's certain decibels that can do something to your ability to hear. And then, of course, the anti-smoking laws, I welcome those. I've never been a smoker in my entire life. I tell you the truth, I remember coming up in the years that they had a smoking section and a non-smoking section, which I thought was always a joke because whatever in the non-smoking section the smoking section would just filter over into the non-smoking section. And I remember going to clubs and places, and you left there, and your clothes, you could smell it in your clothes, especially when you got in your car and you let your window up. It was a real problem. And then we discovered that, again, issue about secondhand smoke and the effects. I remember in 1969, when I first came out of high school, Congress made a move to ban the advertising of cigarettes on television. And all of that airtime was purchased by none other than a person who I knew at the time, and you know of, but his products still continue on McDonald's, and they brought up the airtime. And what used to happen is that they would give away cigarettes on the corners in these little packets. They had people passing them out as samples. That was the way. But now they've gradually reached back to billboards and things like that. But you pay attention. You pay attention to the commercials on TV. You see alcohol, but you don't see smoking. And you shouldn't see that on television. And then the other thing that you should be aware of is that the federal government, the Surgeon General, originally allowed cigarettes to say may cause cancer, could cause cancer on the pack. But now it doesn't say that. And now it says will cause cancer because it's progressive, And then the other thing I try to tell people is take a clue from this. You can tell I'm anti-smoker. Is take a clue from this. When you look at the prices, I remember when I was a little kid to go get cigarettes for one of my relatives with a note they would give me. They would 25 cents. Now people charge that like $1 a cigarette or something like that if they're going to sell you a cigarette. The point of the matter is that the prices have escalated. The next time you are near a gas station, you see the sign and you see the highest price. That's not the gallon of gas. That's the pack or carton of cigarettes. And I tell people what that is telling you is, get out of it. And then I had one person, I challenged them to take the amount of money that they spend on cigarettes and add it up every year. And then at the end of the year, see how much money you could take a trip or vacation, and you can take a car, you can do all kinds of things with that. Anyway, enough on that. But Congress did that. And the reason why Congress passed these laws is because these things happen primarily in interstate commerce, crossing state lines, and some municipalities also passed it. I did note one thing, again, just on a final note on smoking, is that when I went to Vegas, they still smoke in the casinos. You can't smoke in the casinos here in Illinois. I don't know about other jurisdictions. I would submit probably Wisconsin, they have Ho-Chunk up there, and I don't, and maybe some others. The point of the matter is that they don't allow it. But man, when I was in Vegas, every casino, that was one of the bad features about Vegas that I didn't like at all. Anyway, we have regulatory agencies. We're going to talk about a few of those. And that the violation of these things are what we call strict liability laws. And you should know, but I'll repeat again, strict liability laws do not require mens rea, do not mean knowledge of. You recall the exercise that we had a few weeks ago about the person having their driver's license suspended and in a discussion post, and that it's a strict liability crime. It's not based on whether that person knows, but the fact that the law was just violated. And then that's what I'm saying. Mala prohibita. In other words, they're prohibited on their face. And again, I'm not going to talk about strict liability anymore. The food Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. This prohibits impurities in foods, drugs, cosmetics. It also requires that they be labeled properly, that you know what is in there. And again, it says to safeguard the consumer. All of this we're going to talk about involves safeguarding the consumer. Sets the standard for adulterated foods and requires, like I said again, that you be fully knowledgeable about what it is and what's important about these things, because these affect the human body. The food, the drugs, and the cosmetics affect the human body. And so it is very, very, very important. One of the things, though, that you should be aware of is that the law does allow certain percentages of unknown substances that the Federal Food and Drug Administration, FDA, has said that it's okay because it's not poisonous or anything like that. But again, it's ironic because then they discovered later that some of the items that they allowed were not good for the health of people. So the minimum requirements. This is one of my favorite examples of this, talking about Coca-Cola. I'm not a big pop drinker or a big cola drinker. I drink it every once in a while. But Coca-Cola was once made illegal, or at least an attempt to do so, because cocaine. That's why I started out calling it Coke. Things go better with Coke, because cocaine was actually one of the products that was included in Coca-Cola. But then it was replaced with caffeine, and then it went to court on that issue, and the caffeine was so excessive. There's definitely some serious health hazards to consuming large amounts of cocaine. And now what they've done is they've got caffeine free, but then some of the other additives that have been put in there have created problems. And then we started to talk about the question of should the government regulate it. I said yes, because someone needs to protect us, you know. And then, you know, you talk about these drinks like Monster, Red Bull. You know, I always tell people that these energy drinks, they do something. They've discovered that there are people who, you know, who have died. Their heart palpitates or races, or either known to explode with excessive amounts of that. And so I don't drink those things. I remember one time I drank one of them. I never had Red Bull, but I've seen enough people have problems with that, is that it created an uncomfortable feeling in my body that I never wanted to go through again. And so I don't drink those things. I get free samples of them sometimes, and I just throw them away. I don't even pass them on to anybody. But the bottom line is, again, protection of the public. And we already talked about strict liability offenses. Most of them, I will say this and move on, are misdemeanors, but specific intent has to be proved if there's a felony. And these are violations that are excessive. And some people say that these violations shouldn't be strict liability crimes. It labels people as criminal who are without moral fault. Well, here's the deal. Morality and the law should go hand in hand, but there are times when morality and the law separate, and such as people who don't believe in gambling and drinking alcohol and things like that. But my point being is that what happens in a situation like that is that if you don't follow the regulations and procedures that are set out for those things, then you are a criminal. And what's the definition of a criminal? Someone who breaks the law. and has been convicted of that. Zoning ordinances, we get to that, it's a need, because what it is that we have certain communities, certain areas that are designated for commercial and for residential, which we have mixtures of them, but the local ordinances in many municipalities and in counties control zoning. And these are generally not criminal issues, these are civil issues, and most of the violations are misdemeanors, and no intent is required. One of the most common things I've seen as far as zoning is concerned is putting a building that needs what we call a special use permit. And if that building does not meet those standards, then that building cannot be used for that purpose. But once again, it's for protecting the public. I won't go into the details of it. Environmental laws, what happens is I already said that the federal government, Congress, under the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, deals with the individuals that cross state lines. And our environmental laws, again, because we're dealing with air that, goes across state lines, water that touches on the borders of multiple jurisdictions, and so we have in almost every jurisdiction, Illinois has the Illinois Environmental Protection Agency here, or the little EPA, as people call it. That's on a federal level. They coordinate that with the federal government and work with them to make sure that the residents of the state of Illinois are protected. The Rivers and Harbors Act says it's a misdemeanor to discharge refuse in any kind of navigable water. Because of what I said earlier, it goes across borders, and then it damages a very valuable resource, something that is of absolute necessity to us, and that is water. After all, your body is primarily made of water. What is the world made of primarily of? It's water. The United States Supreme Court says that the government can prosecute those. So this is a case that stood for the proposition to interpret the law where Pennsylvania Corporation discharged iron and concrete pipes into the water without a permit. Now, someone said, well, what if they had a permit? Could they do it? Well, here's the thing that would probably happen with the permit. The permit would probably limit the quantity of it. I submit that it's almost impossible to have none of it, but you get to a certain level. But, I'm very concerned oftentimes. You think about it, drinking water. If you're drinking water and you know that it contains some remnants of iron or concrete pipes, no matter how small, you don't want to drink that water. That's period, because it's not good for you. Probably affects the taste too. Clean Air Act, again, the quality of air. Almost every jurisdiction that I know has that protection. If you have a car, I remember when I came up, the gasoline that was used was regular unleaded. Regular lead, I'm sorry. And it wasn't lead-free. But now, you can't even get that gasoline. It all is unleaded because it was determined that the air was being contaminated on a regular basis. Also, now vehicles are required to go through emissions tests to protect the air. You drive behind a vehicle, and the vehicle, you're sick because the fumes come in through your vent into your car, and it can make you and some of the other people sick in the vehicle. So anyway, when you knowingly violate these laws, there are fines that are enforced by many states and local governments. Primarily, you'll get a fine. And the water, we've already kind of talked about that, but you can't discharge pollutants into our navigable water. And navigable waters are only relatively permanent. Our navigable waters are only relatively permanent standing or flowing bodies of water. They go all over the place, such as the Mississippi River is one. It starts up in Minnesota, and it goes all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico, and it hits many jurisdictions on the way down, including the state of Illinois. And it prohibits the discharge of pollutants from any point at any source because of the fact that some of that gets into the soil, and then when it gets into the soil, then it gets to the plants, and we eat the plants, and then the animals may eat the plants, and then whatever came out of that water in the plant gets into that animal, into their body. We eat the meat, and then it gets into our system, and it's destructive. Courts tend to hold personnel with supervisory functions to high standards. We're going to be talking a little bit about that with the corporations. But if you are the supervisor or the person over one of those type of activities, then you're going to be held responsible for the actions of others. So will the individuals who committed as well. This is an example of a oil spill into the Gulf of Mexico. Oil spill flowed for 3 months from BP after an explosion. The spill caused extensive damage to marine life and the wildlife and destroyed beaches, all the things I kind of talked about earlier. BP was sentenced to pay $4.5 million in fines, and what other consequences? I already kind of talked about those things earlier. Contaminates the water. Like I said, it kills the wildlife. It destroys the use of the beaches, but it also is detrimental to individuals who swim in it or may even drink from that or use the water for other reasons. The Resource Conservation and Recovery Act sets out regulations for how we deal with hazardous waste. We talked about that a little earlier. There are penalties and fines. States are encouraged to establish standards, and most have. Illegal actions include transporting hazardous waste to unpermitted facilities, storing, disposing, or treating hazardous waste without a permit, omitting material information, or making a false statement. It's just like, for example, you're familiar with the fact that you're not supposed to, we used to be able to put our televisions on the curb. Now you can put them on the curb, but usually there is a charge from the waste management company, and they will, because they have to pay a certain fee to dispose of that. Many municipalities used to have places where you can come and do it free, but not really free, really. You were really paying your tax dollars, but now even many have cut back on that on the local level. The bottom line is that we are waking up to the point recognizing that we must protect our natural resources. Toxic substances prohibits the manufacture, distribution of chemicals that present unreasonable risk to the environment and to regulate disposal of such chemicals. And, there are companies that are chemical plants. There are pharmaceutical companies that have to dispose of the stuff that they don't use in a special way because it adversely affects the water, and it can adversely affect the air. And they talk about here Robert Earl Ford primarily was prosecuted criminally for actions of dealing with toxic substance. In other words, doing it knowingly, willingly, and with reckless disregard of the law, which is for the protection of the public. Now we get to the point I was talking about earlier. We talked about supervisory responsibility. Now we talk about going right to corporations. As you should know, from the corporate law that I practiced and studied in law school, corporations are entities. They're considered as persons. And it's operated by the board of directors, and the board of directors are responsible for the actions, and the officers of the corporation are also responsible for the actions of the corporation. So therefore, if there is any illegal dumping or violations of the Food and Drug Administration Act, then there is a problem that can reach the point where corporate officers are held responsible. You will be doing some research on that and writing a paper in this week. But for your information, food, drugs, and cosmetics are produced and distributed by these companies, and the officers are accountable if they fail to supervise the production and distribution or allow misbranding and those kinds of things. In United States versus Park, a 1975 case, Park failed to use the authority as a corporate head, leader, and operating the company to prevent food storage in contaminated places. In other words, when it's done, then heads will roll, but it starts at the top. And criminal liability can result in people actually going to jail. United States Supreme Court in the Doleridge case, notice the year 43, has stated that corporate officers are held liable. This is what we call the leading case. In this case, Doleridge's company had purchased drugs from different pharmaceutical manufacturers, but they put their own label on the drugs, and this was considered as misbranding. The court upheld a conviction of this person because they knew that was taking place, and they were responsible for this to prevent public danger. Remember, I talked about that earlier. Noise pollution, we kind of talked about that, and it's important that the local governments and the states pretty much operate these. In, for example, apartments may prohibit the use of loud audio equipment. Why? Because it disturbs not just you, but it disturbs other people around. The Supreme Court has held that ordinances have to be clear and provide adequate notice so that people will have what we call due process rights, the opportunity to be aware of the law, and then if they violate it, then they will be held responsible. Usually there's a decibel issue, which means there's a way to measure the sound in itself that can determine whether or not the person violates the noise pollution in a vicinity. Anti-smoking laws, we've kind of talked about that already, and we talked about the importance of that, so I'm not going to spend more on that. There's more on anti-smoking bans. Protection of wildlife. A state has to protect the wildlife by regulating fishing in public and private streams and by controlling the taking of game. One of the ways that they do that is by requiring hunting and fishing licenses. The Migration Bird Act, and with these licenses, you should be aware there are certain limits as to how much you can kill, how many fish you can catch, and those kinds of things, and how you do it as well. Migration Bird Act protects certain species of migratory birds from hunting. Violation is typically a misdemeanor. It is a felony to take a bird with intent to sell. Now, let me say this to you. While we're talking about protection of wildlife, it is a federal act to kill the bald eagle, which is a symbol of the United States of America. You can go to jail for that pretty quickly in any state of the United States. But it's common knowledge to most hunters that that's the case. Also, there are another good reason is because they're on the endangered species list as well. But with migratory birds, the birds are traveling to different areas, and like I said again, there are times when you can hunt these birds, and then there are times when you can't. But the Act controls and determines all of those things. Endangered Species Act, as I was talking about earlier, designed to conserve the ecosystems. When you say ecosystems, we're talking about the balance. The birds eat the plant, and then it's a recycle. It goes all the way around. The wildlife, the fish, the plant, then the people who eat them, and then it goes around and around and around. Imposing criminal penalties against any person who knowingly violates regulations that are issued under this act. And an example is nesting sea turtles, because they, if you get rid of them, then you're going to interfere with the balance, the ecosystems that are in place to allow recycling of the things. Whale hunting, this is a problem generally in Alaska or away in the North Pole area, where whales are hunted for their oil and used for food, the blubber, clothing, and other products. And then there were, with the technology involved that is able to trick whales into being caught, it increased the number of whales that were killed. And in 1946, the International Convention for the Regulation on Whaling came about. But it's important to protect the whales because, once again, we get back to the species that are placed on Earth, and they serve a role to keep the balance of our ecological system. And that's that for that chapter. Okay. So now we're going to get into something that's a little more directed. We've talked about things that are primarily civil. Now we're going to talk about things that could be more serious and offenses against the public, the order of our country. We're in a time now where these offenses against public order and safety are taking place post-September 11th after the attack on the World Trade Center. We've reached a time where the word terrorist is a pretty, I should say, often used phrase to describe activities. And, you know, I remember years ago when things would happen on a mass level, we didn't say terrorist activity. But after September 11th, we began to use that term more and more and more. So what we're going to spend time with this next chapter is going to talk about offenses against public order, safety, and we're going to deal with national security, which seems to be a big issue as to how the government is dealing with it. Unfortunately, it seems that now the pendulum has swung with national security, where it's overreaching in certain areas, particularly with the issue of immigration. There are clashes there, and sometimes I think that the government is overreaching when it comes to dealing with national security and immigration, because of the fact that, as I constantly remind people, we are a country of immigrants. The only ones who are here are Native Americans, and I tell people all the time that most of us, and I do mean us, were brought from other parts of the world and came to the United States, some voluntarily, some involuntarily, and were brought here or came here seeking opportunities and not to destroy. So now what has happened is that, unfortunately, there is some racial divide in certain portions of the country are under attack in the name of national security, and there has to be a balance between protecting the national security, and then I think that there has to be a good reason for the actions, not just because you feel or think or because you don't like these people. The point of the matter is that people come to America, supposed to be the land of the free, the home of the brave. And so anyway, with that being said, let's get into to what we're talking about. Well, the government has the responsibility of protecting the public, again, as we talked about in the last chapter. Now we're talking about keeping order in our country and have the people be safe. We're at a point now where almost every public event, there's increased security, there's more police, even some governmental agencies are now participating in highly attended events such as Super Bowl, World Series, even some local baseball games now, sports games. You know, I remember when I was a kid going into the ballpark, we used to be able to carry certain things in. Now you can't carry those things in. And there are all kinds of things that have happened. But because of the way that people have demonstrated how they would utilize some of those things that we never even thought of. But anyway, the government has passed criminal laws, and we're going to talk about some of those, to protect the nation, military forces, and there are some intelligence agencies operating. One of the ones that was created, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but I'll just say it, is a Homeland Security. Prior to September 11th, there was no Homeland Security. Homeland Security was created after that because it was recognized that now the United States of America is under the same kind of scrutiny as other countries were. Prior to September 11th, the most major attack that took place on American soil was Pearl Harbor in 1941, and that resulted in a war. So let's go back. Okay, let's go back to 3. Okay, so crimes against public order are rooted in what we call common law. Breaches of the peace, inciting riots, disorderly conduct. These were on a lower level. It was said that if 3 or more people met together with the intention of cooperating to disturb the public peace, it was considered an unlawful assembly. If they took steps to achieve their plans, it was a rout. If they executed their plans, it was a riot. So these laws are in place to protect the public, but there is a clash oftentimes between the First Amendment right to assemble, but it must be with the intent of using this key word peacefully. Peacefully. And we have to be careful not to utilize protecting the public order to prevent people from exercising peaceful assembly. Primarily west with the local and state governments, there are ordinances that prohibit assemblies and disorderly conduct deals with. Again, as I said, there is a conflict between keeping the peace and the First Amendment rights to speech and assembly. And the right is not done away with, but it can be limited to achieve a compelling public interest. In other words, if it's in the best interest of the public and a compelling interest is there, then the law will stand. So here's the point, is that you can't, for example, say just anything. You can't just exercise the right of speech, but there are certain restrictions for protecting the public using the compelling public interest test, which I'm going to kind of break it down to you right now. The Supreme Court stated that the First Amendment right to free speech can't be restricted on the sidewalk in front of the Supreme Court because the sidewalk is not part of the court. And Mary Grace had been told by police that according to this statute, she couldn't hold up a sign displaying the text of the First Amendment on the sidewalk in front of the Supreme Court. The statute was declared unconstitutional, saying that it violated the First Amendment. And I'm well aware of that. When I was in law school, some of us who were leaders in the Black American Law Students Association, we participated on a march in front of the Supreme Court. We didn't block people from going in and out, but we protested a decision in a court case. And this was before 1983, but we were not told, or perhaps that law came after that, but at any rate, they didn't attempt to enforce it against us, maybe because we were supported by, we had some congressional leaders from the Black Caucus, and we had some other powerful people that were in support of our march. But the point of the matter is that you can't stop people from expressing their position. Well, you know that now because every time a court case comes up, every time a Roe v. Wade, every time a Miranda, every time now the LGBT issues come up, there's a whole lot of issues that involve marching in front of the court. People should have the constitutional right to express their position in an orderly manner. The Federal Anti-Riot Act says that if you cross state lines or use the mail, telegraph, radio, television, now I say internet, cell phones, telephone with intent to incite, encourage, participate in, or carry on a riot, or aid or abet a person in inciting a riot, you violate that law. And some have challenged it, but in 1972, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, which is the circuit that I'm in here in Illinois, held that the Anti-Riot Act is not unconstitutionally vague or overly broad. Remember, once again, if they can establish compelling interest for the law, and the interest is to keep the public safe, then in that case, that law will stand. And that's what happened with the Federal Anti-Riot Act and the 1972 Court of Appeals case. In Edwards versus South Carolina, here was an attempt that the state of South Carolina arrested students who had been, they had been watching the speeches and singing songs. The police asked them to disperse, and they didn't do so, and they were arrested. So the court argued that the students were peacefully expressing their positions. The 14th Amendment does not permit the state to criminalize the peaceful expression of an unpopular view, even if you don't agree with it. That's why the Klan can march through places where, and like in an African-American community, but they have to have a whole lot of protection, The Nazis have been able to march through Jewish communities and demonstrate, but they had a lot of protection. The point of the matter is just because we don't agree with what they say, we still have to protect their right to peacefully express their views and position. It has to be peacefully. That's the key word. Occupy Wall Street is an example here. It came after September 11th, and it was in 2011 where there was protesting of social and economic inequality because the economy, was got really tight after September 11th. The protesters gathered in this park in New York City. The police forced them out of the park, and the FBI and the Department of DHS and Homeland Security and all of those were involved in monitoring these organizations and terrorist threats. You can be almost assured that any kind of demonstration that you're going to have some people in the audience or crowd that are from these agencies. So the police put barricades, but the barricades were pushed back by the protesters who were arrested. So the point of the matter is that what the police were trying to do with the barriers was to keep them in a certain area and not have them to go beyond that. And what the protesters decided to do was disobey the orders of the police in terms of it, and not necessarily stop them from protesting, but keep them in a certain area, and that's what created the problem. Vagrancy laws. Vagrancy laws have been around a long time. In feudal England, where most of our law came from, England, referred to being without any visible means of support, being without employment, and being able to work but refusing to do so. Well, many people fall into the category of number two, and being able to work but refusing to do so. Not many people find themselves, if they have an opportunity to work at a fair pay, will refuse to work. Most people don't. So it's not really, that's not really what happens now. In the 1800s, American states started taking a variety of ways of defining vagrancy. In the 50s, laws were mostly limited to alcoholics and to derelicts. But in 1972, the Supreme Court ruled the statutes were vague, but most states continued their practices against homeless and alcoholics for years, and even to this day. States like Florida are really dogmatic about the whole thing. And, you know, they say it's an eyesore. Well, once again, the reason why is because the governmental structure in Florida consists to protect those wealthy or retired individuals who go to Florida, and they go there to enjoy their latter years or to get away from things, and they don't want it to happen there. And so it's unfair. I think it's a violation of the law. People find themselves down and out everywhere across the United States. In Papa Christou, this is the city of Jacksonville, the United States stated that the Supreme Court, that the vagrancy statute was so vague that it led to arbitrary arrest. Papa Christou had been convicted for violating a vagrancy ordinance. Again, there are times when people, they don't have a place to go. They live, they're homeless. They hit on hard times. And the point of the matter is that you can't prosecute those people. You can't throw them in jail because of that. Loitering. So after this Papa Christou case, the states started changing. They started saying, okay, we won't be as broad as getting people like that, but we're going to narrow them. We're going to focus on crimes such as prostitution, drug dealing, things of that nature. So that's what began to happen. Several states and cities enacted ordinances against loitering, but many of those were held unconstitutionally vague. It says loitering laws must focus on conduct, not the status. Again, talking about homeless people in Florida, it's a violation of law to overnight in public places. That's just what I was talking about a few minutes ago. Now, there was this one. I remember this one real well because it was during the time I was practicing law. And what the city of Chicago was trying to do was come up with a way to control the gangs. And the United States Supreme Court did away with that ordinance. And here's what the ordinance did. It says if you were believed to be a gang member loitering in a public place, the reason why you were assembled is because you were up to no good or about to be up to no good. Well, the court said that that's unconstitutional because it did not specify what specific behaviors and didn't give adequate notice to ordinary citizens. Now, Those of us who lived in Chicago understood what they were trying to do, but those of us with legal minds, and particularly those who were like the ACLU or individuals who were defense attorneys, we understood that just because you're a known gang member and you're talking to another known gang member, that you could not be arrested just for the conversation. You weren't doing anything but talking. But we generally know that the reason for the conversation was probably to either move forward in some future illegal activity, or that some discussions were being planned for something to take place very shortly thereafter. But the Supreme Court says you can't do that. You can't presume or assume, and it was overly broad. That's the whole problem in a nutshell. So the statute was determined to be unconstitutionally vague. Panhandling, before Papa Christou, laws regularly regulated begging. No begging, you can't beg. I already told you why. After the court invalidated vagrancy laws because of vagueness, cities enacted new ordinances against begging, and then they called it panhandling. Well, the Supreme Court hasn't reached the stage of dealing with that yet, and so it's going to probably take a case from Florida, because that's where the biggest issue that you keep hearing it come up about, and the Supreme Court's going to have to determine the constitutionality of statutes like that, but it hasn't taken place. State courts have typically struck down ordinance laws against begging in public, so it hasn't reached the stage of the Supreme Court. So it's almost like on a state-by-state basis, case-by-case, until finally, if the courts strike it down, that means they allow it, then the jurisdiction in which law that's trying to enforce the law will have to take it to the next level, and that hasn't happened yet. Motor vehicle violations, strict liability offenses such as speeding, failing to yield right away, not wearing a seatbelt, texting while driving. These are all laws that not only are protecting the public, but it's protecting the individuals as well. And these are strict liability offenses. It's very simple. I was a village prosecutor for some years, 89 and 93, and I'd have people come to court, and they said that the posted speed limit was 30, and they were doing 35 or 31 or 32, and they didn't realize what they were doing is that they were saying I was speeding. And then their defense was, what about the 5-mile rule? Some people think that there is actually a rule that allows you to go 5 miles over the speed limit and not be prosecuted. There never has been one that I've known of, so I've never seen it, and we used to chuckle about it. But the point of the matter is that what people are really trying to say is that the calibration of the speed tool, the speed gun, could be off a little bit by 1 or 2, but not 5. Okay. So anyway, wearing a seatbelt. I know people for years fought the seatbelt issue. I know people used to say, "Oh man, I'm too sharp to be wearing a seatbelt." I used to tell them, "Yeah, you wear a seatbelt, or else you'll still be sharp, but you'll be in a casket." But now, seatbelts, and I'm going to tell you something, seatbelts have saved my life. I remember I was in a car accident years ago, and the impact of that other vehicle that hit me, but for the fact that I had a seatbelt, would have, even though I was the only person in that car, propelled me out the window, or either broken my ribs with the steering wheel, one or the other. But the seatbelt saved me. Texting while driving, I'm shaking my head. You know, I don't even have to explain that to you. It is disastrous. you know, and it's put the phone down. You don't need to do that. I see people doing it all the time and talking on the phone when that's a strict liability offense. Hands-free devices are used. There was some movement at one point to try to say that no cell phone usage in cars, but it didn't go over very well because people do, it does distract you even while talking, but you're going to be talking to people in the vehicle. So what are they going to do? Say no talking in your vehicle? It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. So there's a balance between it. So texting while driving, hands-free phones, that's the law. And if you violate it, I didn't know that there was a law in this jurisdiction. I know someone recently who was in another jurisdiction, and they said, oh, no, I didn't know that I couldn't have my hands on my phone while driving. I said, it's pretty much a federal thing. And almost every state jurisdiction has implemented laws of that nature because we've seen the effects of distracted driving. The 1980s rules of road made traffic rules more uniform across states, what I just said, but there are still some differences. Decriminalizing traffic offenses, until the 60s, most offenses were misdemeanors, but some are felonies now. Offenses are not a crime, but a civil infraction, and you can find yourself in traffic court paying a nice amount of change and or losing your license. If you have a CDL as a commercial driver's license, it can adversely affect your ability to be able to make a living. Gun control and the Second Amendment, I'm just going to talk a little bit about that. It's an overstatement if you live in a urban area to be in favor of gun control. If you are in a rural area or in some suburbs, the Second Amendment is applied with the right to bear arms. I am not going to comment about an interpretation of the Second Amendment in this class, but I will say to you that if you take a course that I teach on constitutional law, there is one discussion, the whole lecture, the whole chapter, the whole week is all about the Second Amendment and discussions about it. But there are debates about it, and you know, the question of people who are mentally ill or have a felony are excluded from this right. However, though, just recently, you should be aware that our president Mr. Trump has said that we need to do away with that, which kind of like made me, you know, do this. So how I'm looking on this thing like, what? You know, okay, let's let little babies have guns. You know, we're going to have people who are irresponsible having guns. What do you think mentally ill people are doing? So state and federal government have the right to impose gun regulation laws, impose background checks. Believe it or not, there are people, some people who believe that we shouldn't have background checks. Concealed weapons. Illinois was the last state to enact the carry concealed laws. One of my classmates from Northwestern led the crusade to fight that, and he still continues to speak out against those, and I do understand him, and I do support him, and I say that. And I'll say this to you, as far as gun control and the Second Amendment, it depends. There are many people who were in favor of the Second Amendment protecting the right to bear arms until they lost a loved one with a handgun. And then after that, then the situation swung. So it depends. There's an argument that is actually fostered by the National Rifle Association, which is one of the most powerful lobbying organizations in the United States, fosters the point about the Second Amendment guarantees every citizen the right to bear a firearm. And then the gun control people argue that because the number says more than 300,000, it's above that now since 2008, involve violence with handguns. So the issue of gun control is open for debate and will continue for a long time under debate. And then these are reasons why, such as what happened at Sandy Hook, included the victim's mother, 20 children, and 6 teachers administrators. Some people felt like afterwards they armed themselves for self-protection. That's still not good enough, and we still have the same problem that's taking place. Now we started to swing towards wrapping up and coming to dealing with national security. Treason, we don't have a whole lot of that taking place, making a war against one's own government or giving aid to its enemies. No one's been convicted of treason since World War II. Espionage, the crime of turning over state secrets to a government, the Intelligence Identities Protection Act of 1982. So more people have been prosecuted for espionage, that is, giving away military secrets. There is a young man whose name escapes me at the very moment, but you know who I'm talking about. I know his name, and I just can't recall it right now, but he is one who has fled to a place where he can't be extradited. In fact, they did a movie about this situation. There has also been some military people who have been involved in espionage, and they have found themselves in situations and circumstances where government secrets are involved. And so we want to do, what we want to do now is protect the country from espionage. Okay. Let's see. I'm trying to. Let's see. Okay, there's another person. Kevin Mallory was one. But the one I was trying to think of, I cannot think of his name. But anyway, this young man has been guilty of espionage. So the point of the matter is that dealing with secrets and turning those secrets over to a foreign government. I am drawing a brain cramp on him. I could see him. Sabotage. Sabotage is the crime of infiltrating and destroying a nation's war-making capabilities, and so we find ourselves I can't think of his name, and that is bugging me. But you know who I'm talking about. Okay. So anyway, the fact of the matter is that we have found ourselves in situations where it is very important to protect the public from those individuals who are selling these secrets or passing them on to other individuals. And so, let's see. Give me a second. Anyway, so the fact of the matter is that there's laws. The crime of advocating or working towards violent overthrow of government sedition. We get to sabotage the crime of infiltrating and destroying a nation's war-making capabilities. These are national security activities. Now, they take place still today, as I said, but they're not at the level where they're as big as the terrorist activities. Usually, these individuals find themselves in situations where they have tried to make a buck or something like that. They haven't pledged allegiance to an organization except to try to make money in most cases. But it puts our country in harm's way. So now we get to combating terrorism. And we've already talked about terrorism, but specifically the definition here is the crime of inflicting terror on a population through the indiscriminate killing of people and destruction of property, often with explosive devices. You're familiar with the Boston Marathon situation. You're familiar with the use of weapons and guns. You're familiar with the Oklahoma City bombing and other instances like that. But we're in a time now where our United States soil is subject to terrorism, and so the government takes steps to protect us from terrorists. Anti-Terrorism Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996 expanded federal jurisdiction with respect to investigation and prosecution of international terrorism enacted after the Oklahoma City bombing. But again, the level of those attacks was nothing to the extent or the level of the September 11th Act, which brought on what we now know as the Patriot Act, which we are discussing this week in our discussion post after September 11th, prohibits support for terrorist organizations inside and outside. People now can be arrested for appearing to prepare themselves to or sympathize with organizations like Al-Qaeda and organizations that are all over the world that seek to destroy the United States. Racketeering and fraud in connection with certain cyber crimes, using computers and laptops, and then for the possession of biological weapons as well, things that can infiltrate our air and our water. And the Patriot Act allows civil forfeiture and secret warrants and searches. It's a relaxing of the Fourth Amendment right, search and seizure, that's utilized. And again, remember I told you there's a compelling interest for this law that allows that to take place. What could be more compelling after what happened with September 11th? So there are people who argue that the law reaches too far, but I have submitted that we as a country, times have changed, and that again, like as I said earlier, when you go to big events, oftentimes people are looking over their shoulders, and any kind of noise or something, it can create a stampede of people, a firecracker going off or something that's unknown in there, one weapon fired, those kind of situations. The bottom line is that we have to recognize that we are in an era where we're in a society where terrorists utilize public events to propagate their political agendas. And so therefore, the Patriot Act is here in an attempt to try to minimize it. Doesn't eliminate it, but to minimize it. We already had acts like RICO, the Racketeering Control Act, but now we have the Patriot Act, which reaches further than RICO. Air traffic, aircraft piracy, taking over control of an aircraft, naval piracy, taking control over boats and ships, very serious offenses that take place. Hijackers, air pirates. Naval piracy is an example of that. I'm going to skip over that. Weapons of mass destruction. These are weapons that, as I said earlier, were designed to kill large number of people. Nuclear, radiological, biological, chemical weapons. Years ago, there was a guy who was from the Chicago area, and he was sending out anthrax to people, a poisonous powder or substance. And then there was the Unabomber, and people like that. The threats of weapons of mass, his name was Ted Kaczynski. That was that guy's name. So the threat of using weapons of mass destruction is a criminal offense, obviously, because of what it is. It affects large numbers of people. Jack Wise and Johnny Wise and Jack Grebe were convicted for threatening to use biological weapons. Even if you're threatening and you don't really have it, but the ability, you can be arrested. Emails and things like that, presenting or saying that you have those things as well. Finally, we get to immigration offenses. And I kind of talked about that, but violations of the criminal provisions of the Immigration Nationality Act of Federal Law against Immigration. The government has plenary power over immigration. Most immigrants, it says, come over the southern border. I don't know if that's true. I don't think that's true. But the fact of the matter is that we have to be very careful for what I said about earlier. There are differences between the political parties that have hindered a unified approach towards illegal immigration. There are people who are adversely affected who have been committed to the United States, served in the military, who have demonstrated an ability to become taxpayers and a desire to want to just receive a good life and are subject to deportation. It's a scary thing that there are people who are living in the United States who have been here for years, and they brought their babies here from other countries, and those children grew up and couldn't receive the benefits of many things, even though the parents were taxpayers, because of the fact that they were what we call dreamers, and that the law limited the ability to be able to get government grants, student loans, and all those kind of things. It's a problem that still needs to be addressed as I sit here today. And so we have to be very careful, as I said at the outset, at the end here I will say, is that we can't use immigration as a tool to fight terrorists. That's my whole point in a nutshell. Because there are way more innocent individuals, families who are adversely, such as a person who, again, comes from another country here illegally, and then they have a child here. Well, that child could stay, but then that parent is deported, then that child goes into the welfare system or foster care or some other situation that should not take place. We are a country that promotes families, but instead utilizing the immigration laws to deal with possible terrorism is okay, but it can't be overreaching. And when it starts to affect breaking up families of innocent individuals, then we got a problem here. So I'm going to say good night, and that's it for today.